my channel. My name is Anne, and this is Postcards from My Golden Years. I'm so happy to see you today. I've got so much to tell you. Today, we're going to talk about renting an apartment in France. Primarily if you're someone planning to retire to France. So, stay tuned, let's get started. So, because Jeff and I didn't have a bazillion dollars in a retirement account, we both came from divorces before we met, and we pretty much had to start from scratch putting together a little nest egg. In addition, we're living in a rented home. Unlike a lot of people who leave the U.S. to retire in France, they have a house to sell, and they take the proceeds from that house and put it into a new house or condo in France. Because we are renting our home, we decided we're not going to have something big to sell. Anyway, we decided that we are going to rent. Renting, in case you haven't really thought about it, gives you more flexibility than buying. First of all, if you rent a place, you can take a 1-year lease, or you can get a 3-year lease. And in France, they have very strict rental guidelines. And basically, what the rules are is if you're renting a furnished apartment or condo, typically you're allowed to get a 1-year lease. If you're renting an unfurnished apartment or condo or home, you can get a 3-year lease. Regardless of which we take, having a lease will give us the flexibility to decide at the end of the lease that, we don't like living in this neighborhood. Maybe you want to move to another neighborhood. Or maybe we don't want to stay in Nice. Maybe you want to move across the border to Italy. It gives us all kinds of flexibility. In addition, when I've veered towards pushing Jeff into at least considering trying to get a mortgage in France, which from what I understand is nearly impossible for people over the age of, I believe it is 60. There aren't a lot of mortgage writers who will write mortgages. Maybe private people will allow you to have a mortgage on their home if they're selling it. But from research I've done, typically mortgage writers don't write mortgages for people over 60. But occasionally I've seen things online for a condo in a fairly decent part of Nice, and I sort of veer it over to Jeff and I say, what do you think? Do you want to at least think about it? Maybe we could just, put 10 or 20% down and have a mortgage, and maybe the mortgage would be lower than paying rent. And he brought up something that I totally forgot about. There's a homeowners association, and if something goes wrong in the building, there is a homeowner's assessment. If there is a leak in the building or the facade of the building has to be redone or whatever, then everybody participates in paying that. There are homeowners association fees, and these are additional costs that we really don't want. In addition, if you own the property, there's upkeep, taxes. We also thought about the fact, based on what these places cost and how much of a place we could theoretically afford, we realized that we can afford to rent a bigger place than we can afford to buy. So let's say we spend 1,800 euros a month. That will give us a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment with maybe 2 baths. That's really all we need. And that 1,800 euros a month, I have to tell you, it's like more than $1,000 less than we're paying here in Florida for rent. So what we're trying to do is downsize and lower our monthly payments. These are some of the things we considered when we started thinking about the pros and cons of attempting to get a mortgage and renting. Voila, and then there was light. I'm sorry, I forgot to put my light on before I started talking. So, an unfurnished apartment in France. The only thing that comes with an unfurnished apartment in France are you get the walls, painted walls or wall covering. You have covering on the floor, lighting, a working bathroom, and I'm trying to think if there was anything else, curtains. And I'm not even sure that it has to be curtains per se, but it may have to be a window covering. So that's it. So if you're going to France and you're thinking of renting an unfurnished apartment, because quite frankly, the rents are less expensive if you rent an unfurnished apartment, you have to be ready to install your own kitchen. I happen to think this is a great idea because we've stayed at some Airbnbs that had decent kitchens, but we stayed at one in Paris that I really didn't like the kitchen at all. And if I'm going to rent something, I would love to have my own appliances, especially if when I move, I get to take those appliances with me and they're my appliances. That way we can be sure of having, the stove that I want, not just some little hob burner to put a pot or two on, and not some little university-sized refrigerator, but maybe a full-size refrigerator and a washer and a dryer, and maybe a little bit of counter space and some nice cabinetry so that we have a place to store things. Jeff, of course, is an architect, and when I suggested to him just yesterday, he gave me a look like, are you kidding me? I really don't want to be bothered with now installing appliances in a kitchen. I'm going to be retired. I just want to relax. So I'm sure there are people in Nice or wherever in France that you can hire. Maybe when you go to the appliance store to buy these things, they have an additional service crew that you can pay to come out and put your kitchen in. So off the top of mine, my preference would be to go for an unfurnished apartment. The other thing with an unfurnished apartment is you can rent an unfurnished apartment for 3 years. That is typically the rental period for an unfurnished apartment. So once you get settled and you buy furniture and you buy all your household things and you put in your nice kitchen, you're there. You can stay there. You could stay there forever unless the building burns down or the place is sold or for some reason the landlord doesn't want to renew the lease at the end of those months. Now, conversely, if you get a furnished apartment, according to France rental laws, you can only rent a furnished apartment for 1 year, a 1-year term. You can renew it after that, but initially it's a 1-year term. Furnished apartment will come with all of the basics that you need to live. It will have, of course, curtains, walls, wall covering or floor covering, a complete kitchen that has everything that you need, all of the basics to prepare meals, basic kitchen appliances, everything basic, a coffee maker, espresso maker, pots, pans, silverware, dishes, glasses. And it may be very rudimentary. If you've ever gone to an Airbnb, a furnished Airbnb in France, you pretty much know what I mean. You have everything you need for basic food preparation. I mean, actually in Paris and Nice, we've stayed at a few Airbnbs that had some very, very well-equipped kitchens. It looked like they did some serious cooking in the kitchen, and it was well-equipped. So first you need to decide, are you going to look for a furnished apartment or condo or house, or are you going to look for unfurnished? Now, if you look for unfurnished, again, not only do you have to put your own kitchen in if it doesn't happen to have one, you've got to buy all the furniture. So if, like us, you're coming to France and you're selling everything here in the US before you go, I happen to think it would be fun to go shopping at the thrift stores and secondhand places and buy all kinds of fun things and refurnish the apartment. I think Jeff just wants to go there with suitcases, sit on the couch and say, okay, I'm home, I'm done. So, we still have to work that through. But we are looking to lower our monthly expenses, and one way to be sure of doing it is to rent an unfurnished apartment. Although I have to say, even a furnished apartment with the higher rent, the rent is maybe, I don't know, 400 or 500 euros more to have a furnished place. I mean, at least based on what I've seen. There may be some that aren't that high or some that are even higher. Whatever it is, the cost of renting in Nice is far less than what it's costing us living in a tourist town here in Southwest Florida. So we already know, furnished or unfurnished, we're going to be saving money on our living expenses in France. Okay, what are some things you're going to need to provide to the landlord or whoever is considering your application for rental of their home or apartment if you're going to be retiring to France? And I sort of put a little asterisk there because I'm primarily talking to those of you who are leaving the US, you're retiring from your job, or maybe you're already retired. Everybody needs to present a dossier, which is basically your background story. So everybody needs to prepare and present a dossier, for the most part, to be considered, to have your application considered to rent their particular property. So what things are included in the dossier? Well, if you've just left a job, you need to have 3 pay stubs, your last 3 pay stubs, before you are there applying for the apartment. If you are retiring from that job, you need to have a letter from your employer stating the dates of employment, what your annual salary was, and that you were a wonderful employee. They want to know that you have good character. So if you're a self-employed person, you would simply have to show in a bank account your earnings, proof of earnings. So if you don't have an employer, you're retiring from the US, or maybe you retired previously, they want you to show that you have income, monthly income coming in, sufficient to pay the rent. And if you are a self-employed person, they want to see the income that was deposited into your account as you were employed in your own business. If you have a pension, you need to provide documentation in writing of your pension, the amount of the pension, or if you have some other kind of a retirement account. If you are going to be collecting United States Social Security, you need to provide the statement from Social Security that shows what your monthly amount is going to be. So now I just went right onto the socialsecurity.gov website, and you can print out the statement. Now, the statement that I have shows what my gross amount is, but then it also shows a deduction for Medicare, and then we have withholding tax taken out of our Social Security. When we move, after we've completed our next U.S. tax return and no longer have any additional income, we will drop the withholding tax because Social Security alone with no other income is not taxable. So we won't have to worry about paying tax. So that will increase our monthly net. And before we leave the United States, we will go to Social Security and have them pause our Medicare deduction. Not cancel it altogether, but pause it in case for some reason we decide one day to come back to the United States and we want to reinstate it. So it's just sitting there on hold, and they stop taking the deductions out because, as you may or may not know, Medicare can't be used in France. So you need to have that Social Security statement showing what that payment is going to be so they see what the net is. And in our particular case, because the statement that I have printed out is going to show the tax withholding and the Medicare withholding, I will also have to attach a statement that says we're going to be pausing our Medicare deduction and no longer have tax taken out, which will change the net to X amount. So you need to provide 3 months prior bank statements. You need to be able to show that you have sufficient income to cover the rent in France. They may require that you prove that you have the entire year's worth of required rent already in a bank someplace. You need to have a French bank account for most rentals, and fortunately we've already started the process. But that seems to be one of the biggest hurdles for some people. They go over there and they rent Airbnbs to start, and while they're sitting in the Airbnb waiting to rent, they've got to get that bank account because the landlord will not allow them to sign the lease until they can prove that they have a bank account. And a lot of landlords want the rent to be automatically deducted from that bank account. So part of what you will get from the bank is a little form that comes in a little back of your checkbook, and you tear it out. It's called an RIB, and it provides the banking information so the landlord can withdraw the rent automatically from your bank account. So you need to be able to prove that you have applied for the appropriate long stay visa before you go to rent the apartment, before the lease on the apartment would begin. Because obviously, if you're not authorized to be in the country legally, it would be tough for a landlord to rent to you, having a concern that you could be deported. You also have to provide proof of health insurance. So once you move over to France, in order to get your long stay visa, initially you have to buy a prepaid 1-year health insurance policy. And so you can provide that as proof of health insurance. You also, if you've been renting in the US, you need to provide the prior 3 months proof of rent receipts. Now in our case, we simply mail a check, so those can suffice. We also have to have a letter of reference from our current landlord, talking about the length of the lease, the amount of our rent, and how we handled our obligations as renters. Did we adhere to the lease? Did we take good care of their property? Basically, it's another recommendation from our current landlord. So you need to have that if you're renting. If you are selling a property, you need to provide documentation showing that you have sold the property and proceeds of the sale. You also have to have a copy of your prior utility bill, your last prior utility bill that has both of your names on the utility bill. So you just print that out and make that part of it. We had to have that for the bank account. So if you're opening a bank account, you're already gathering that information. Next, you have to have a guarantor to be able to show that if you can't pay the rent, somebody else will. So with GrantMe, they guarantee that the rent is covered, and they guarantee rent up to 90 euros per year. So a lot of landlords prefer to rent to people who have taken the additional expense of using GrantMe as their guarantor, because they know they don't have to worry about covering rent or losing monthly rent if the tenant doesn't pay the rent. So again, they're covered up to 90,000 euros per year. I don't even think we could afford to rent a place for 90,000 euros a year. So with GrantMe, the cost for this is based on the number of tenants, and each tenant has to pay the guarantee. So for example, on a 1,700 euro per month apartment, it's around $1,100 per year for this GrantMe, and that's total for the two of us. So it's a little over $550 a year per person. The one that is probably the most well-known is Adrian Leeds. And if you happen to watch US television, there's a show called House Hunters International. Adrian is typically the realtor that appears on that show when there's a realtor showing property either for rent or for sale in Paris or Nice, although she's in the last year or so branched out, and I've seen some shows where she's showing property in other parts of France. Anyway, what her agency and other agencies like hers does is they have a lot of contacts with realtors all over France. And they have agents also located in other parts of France. And so while there's no MLS or master listing of rentals, they have enough contacts within the country and different cities that they can pick up the phone and find out what's available wherever it is you would like to go. And I guess they work out some sort of cooperative agreement so that they share commissions. Many years ago, I met Adrian at a soiree in Paris, and there was a woman, unfortunately she passed away a few years ago, but this woman used to have soirees, I think it was on Sunday nights or maybe it was some other night of the week, and she would invite speakers in, and they would come to her little home on Ile-de-France in Paris. And she would offer wine and food, and people would bring wine or they'd make a donation, and she would have interesting speakers. And so many years ago, this probably goes back to the 90s, I met Adrian at one of these, and she was speaking about her journey moving from the United States to France and setting up her real estate agency. So fast forward a few years ago, actually during COVID, Adrian had put on a seminar online. It was during COVID because people couldn't travel. And she had a mortgage professional, and there was herself, and there was an interior designer, and I forget what other professionals that were related that she had there. And she basically talked about the process of working with her agency, or another agency for that matter, to locate a home to buy or an apartment to buy, condo to buy in France. And they talked about how to get mortgages and how to qualify for these things. And she talked about the services that her agency offers. And basically what she will do is you meet with her or one of her representatives. In our case, we're going to be moving to Nice. So I had been in contact with her office, I guess about 6 months ago, and they told me that I'll need to meet with Adrian. So we are going to try to set up an appointment with Adrian for when we're back in Nice in November, so that we can sit down with her, tell her what we're looking for, and then she and her staff will go to work for us and either show us things if they're available while we're in town, or they'll be able to go out and preview things for us. And I guess they can do video visits and send us videos, or they can do a video call with us and do a walkthrough while we're on the phone with her. There are all kinds of things she could do. So we can work with her from the United States while she's there. She will also assist if people need it in getting a French bank account, because she has contacts in the banking industry that she's been working with for all of her, I guess, close to 30 years in France. She has mortgage contacts. Her staff can take care of pretty much all of the services. They have a lot of landlords that they are working with very closely, that they've worked with for a long time. So if her company gets to know you and you've presented them, I guess, with a very good dossier that they can present to prospective landlords. Of course, it's for a fee. Don't happen to think that the fee is huge when you consider all of the services that they provide. They also read the leases, they negotiate the lease on your behalf. They can assist you in getting utilities set up when you move to France, or getting them put in your name. They even have services that you can pay for, of course, where they will go to your residence, and if you're in the United States and you have a delivery coming, my understanding is they'll go there and greet whoever is delivering whatever it is, so that they can put it inside your home or apartment. So we haven't met with her. We don't have the full list of everything she can do for us. But when we think of, okay, we need to find an apartment in France, for peace of mind, this is the first place we're going to look. Now, if you don't want to pay the additional fee, or it's not in your budget, then you're going to want to search for an apartment on your own. And that makes it a little bit more complicated, because now you're on your own to locate the apartment, to do the negotiation for the lease, make sure that you're protected, and I guess get the best deal you can. So let's talk about the different options for renting or finding a rental on your own. A number of people that I'm familiar with who have rented an Airbnb and then decided, hey, I really like to live here. Like, can I just rent this indefinitely? typically, you can't rent an Airbnb for more than a year without a separate contract. Now, I've gone on Airbnb and I've selected Airbnbs that looked interesting to click on them, and I take the calendar and I try to suggest dates that are, starting date here and the ending date a year later, and I have not yet found one Airbnb where that process goes through. So it would be a situation where I would have to contact the owner of that particular apartment or home and ask if they would be open to a long-term rental. And because it's furnished, it would typically be a 1-year long-term rental. Now, as I said, I know of at least one person who stayed in an Airbnb that she liked, and she liked it so much that she waited until it became available full-time, and then she moved to France to live in it. And she's lucked out. I think she's in her 2nd year, and I don't know how many years her lease is. But she's in a place that she's happy in. It's got enough space for her and her little doggies and kitty cat, and it works. So I will still be looking at Airbnb as a possibility. In fact, when we go to France in November, we're staying at one Airbnb, and I'm going to have a list of other Airbnbs that I will contact in advance if they're in areas that we want to live in. I'll contact the owner and tell them that we're going to be in Nice and ask if they would be open to a long-term rental, and if so, ask if they wouldn't mind showing us the apartment while we're in Nice. And then if they're open to it, if we find something we absolutely love, we would give them a deposit to hold it until we come back in April. Or if they want us to sign for a lease sooner, we would do that, although because we won't have a long stay visa, I'm just not sure we're going to be able to get that lease before we're actually living there with a long stay visa in hand. Another place online where you can find apartment rentals is a website called Seloger. Now, you have to be careful on these websites because there are a lot of scams. So you have to do a lot of research, and one of the key things is don't rent anything sight unseen. I know it's an added expense to have to fly over to France to take a look at something if you're still living in the US, but I've heard of some terrible stories where people have sent money and they get over to France thinking that they have rented a place, and they get there and there's nothing. The owner lives there, or somebody else lives there and didn't know anybody else was renting out their home or apartment on Airbnb or Seloger. So you have to be very, very careful, ask a lot of questions, do a lot of research, and make sure that it is a valid apartment that they are authorized to rent. Another place to look for rentals is another website. It's sort of like the French Craigslist, and it's called Lebquan. And I will put the information on both Seloger and Lebquan down below in the details under my video so that you can check them. Again, same situation. If you're going to be in the United States when you're doing the search, be very careful. Don't send any money ahead of time. Sometimes I've heard some stories of people that in order to look at apartments, they're asked to send money to look at apartments. Don't do that. There is no such thing as having to send money before somebody will let you see their apartment. So do lots of research and see the apartment, or if you have a friend or family member in France who is willing to go and check out that apartment for you, do that. Okay, let's talk about the ads that you see on Lebquan or Seloger, or even on Facebook. There's a forum that people post that they have apartments or homes for rent. I've seen it for Nice or the south of France. I don't know if there's one for Paris and other parts, but you can certainly check. Just go on Facebook and check rentals, rent apartment or rent home in France, and see what comes up as far as private groups. Decoding the ads for apartments rental It's like looking at a new language. People, when they list their apartment, there's this whole glossary of abbreviations. And what I'm going to show you here are the basic ones. The most important points that I would be looking for, how to tell the difference between a one-bedroom, an efficiency, a two-bedroom, between an efficiency, one-bedroom, two-bedroom, and always keep in mind that the kitchen is not counted as a room. So typically when they're talking about a T1, that's an efficiency, that is one room. A T2 would be two room, and by two room, that means the living room, typically it's a living room, dining room combination, and then a bedroom, so that would be a T2. A T3 would be a two-bedroom plus a living room, dining room combination. And again, the kitchen's always included, and then the bathrooms are mentioned additionally. And also keep in mind that bathrooms in France are not like the bathrooms in the US. Often there is a separate toilet room from the shower room or the bathtub room. So here are a list of the abbreviations, and I will post a link to a glossary where I found these online, so that if you want to print out the glossary or download it to your computer to open up side by side when you're reading the rentals online, it's a big help. Let me tell you, there's so many abbreviations for things. And it'll give you a better understanding of what the condition of the apartment is in, and whether it has a balcony or a patio or a garden, or parking, all of that information. So let me show you that. Okay, so what are the additional expenses when you rent an apartment? You have to pay for your own electric, your own water, your own other utilities, and you have to pay for the internet. If you're one of those lucky people who is renting in a building where the internet is included, good for you, but you may have to pay extra if you want to get those additional services like HBO and Netflix. I'm bringing my Fire Stick, my Amazon Fire Stick. It just plugs right into the back of a television, and that's how I'm going to be watching Netflix and Max and HBO. I'll just keep my subscriptions. Okay, also, if you're renting in Nice, let me tell you, parking is not easy to find. And so if you have a car or you're going to be buying a car, you're probably going to make your search include a place that has free parking, a garage, sort of a driveway. We rented a car a few years back when we went to Nice, and it cost us about 80 euros a night, which is probably closer to 90 US dollars per night, parking in the municipal lots overnight. The last thing in the world we want is to pay for parking. So in our particular case, we are opting not to get a car unless we're lucky enough to rent a place that comes with a garage or a driveway where we can park the car. Otherwise, we're fine using the tram, buses, Uber, the train. You can get almost anywhere you want. Once you're in Europe, not too far from the train station, in Nice, you can hop on the tram, you're at the train station, hop on the tram, you're at the airport. What more do you need? We do think we may get a scooter if we're going to have a place to keep the scooter, because we don't want to keep the scooter out on the street. So if there's a place for us to keep a little scooter that we can both ride together, that way we can kind of tool around and up and down and go into town without really walking too far if we don't feel like walking that day or night. So if you're used to having a car in the US to go everywhere, and you're going to be living in a little city where public transportation is available, don't assume that you're going to want to have the car with you unless parking is free. There's lots of parking, or you're going to have a driveway or a garage. And another thing I just want to throw out there, if you're a senior, that is, if you're age 65 and older, in France, you are considered elderly. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? Elderly? I mean, I don't think of myself as elderly. But anyway, the France rental laws are very kind to the elderly. So I will cover that in a future video. I'll talk about the benefits that you have, the protections that you have as an elderly person. I just hate saying elderly, but I'll talk about it in a future video. So thanks so much for watching. I hope to come up with some more interesting topics regarding moving or retiring to France soon. If you've got some suggestions of things you'd like me to research, or maybe I've already researched them, and things you'd like me to share with you, please comment below. I do read all of those comments, and I will certainly add them to my list of things to do a video about for you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now. Hey, if you'd like this video, if you thought it was informative, please do me a favor, give it a thumbs up. The thumbs up really does help my video. YouTube will show it to more people, because if you give it a thumbs up, they're going to think, wow, this must be a good video. Let's offer it as a suggestion to lots of people. And that helps my channel grow. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you.